variety of different economic development activities across the entire Spain region, and then we've been doing specifically a lot of work in the last few years with manufacturers, and as many of you know, really the East Bay is really kind of the epicenter of the state's manufacturing ecosystem. So happy to be here and share some of the feedback you've been hearing.
Good morning. Thanks for having us. My name is Maria Petrina. I work with Mr. Rodney Fawn at the Chamber of Commerce, and I assist him also leading international affairs for the Chamber of Commerce. And the Chamber represents 1,500 businesses, 65% of them small businesses that are getting heavily impacted by these tariffs. So really happy to be here and take part in this conversation.
Hi, my name is Darlene Chubanian. I am the founder and executive director of Global SF. The organization does economic development, which means cross-border trade and investment. Over the years, we've been credited for bringing over $5 billion for direct investment into the Bay Area. And of course, we're seeing a lot of challenges now. Happy to be here. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Andrew Mielik. I'm an infill developer. I build infill housing in our urban areas. For about 10 years, I've been working on land use policy to make it easier to build this type of housing. I didn't ever think that I was going to have to talk about monetary policy, and that would be an obstruction to doing the thing that we do.
Matt Karamian, Bay Area External Affairs.
Well, thank you all. Thank you for being here and for the range of industries and geographic areas that you're here representing. We really appreciate you taking the time with us today to talk about the impact of tariffs on your businesses, on your communities, and on your projections, and how you're grappling with what we see today with the president's really chaotic and unlawful tariffs here. So I'm hoping that we can have a fairly free-ranging conversation. I'm going to pose some questions, and I may call on all of you, but please feel free to jump in as we're going here as well. We'll bring a number of different perspectives to the table, and hope that you will not be shy in jumping in and telling us your thoughts as we go through here. So to get us started, what are the impacts that you are already seeing from the Trump administration's tariffs policies, and what sorts of impacts are you bracing for? What do these tariffs mean for your businesses, for your organizations, and for your operations today, and what you anticipate needing to grapple with as we go? Throw it to Martha first. Here with our part.
So, I think it's challenging to have a collective number. There's lots of stats that you've heard from the executive directors of Port of LA, Port of Long Beach, so it's hard to do a collective kind of stat, but I think the unpredictability is really challenging for the courts, right? Because it is not like COVID, it's not going to be kind of that surge that we saw in COVID. Likely right now it's fewer vessels in April. We're predicting fewer vessels in May for sure. Fewer vessels means fewer jobs, right? It means higher cost of carrying inventory. So it's really challenging to be able to predict. And right now we are going into ordering for holiday, right? So it's going to be, everyone's trying to predict what they're going to need, what they should be putting in the queue for holiday. So it is really a critical time. And these kind of pauses and these changes that are constantly happening makes it really difficult for people to plan for their business. And for Port of LA, for example, about 125 companies use that port, and many of those are small and mid-sized, and they just cannot try to predict, and they cannot absorb, right, these higher costs. So, there's the larger VCOs that, can plan a little bit better. I mean, it's still chaotic for them. We know that Walmart has made some announcements about prices and what that's going to look like. But I think what we should really be concerned with is those small and mid-sized businesses, that this is a really big break for them getting through the holidays. On the export side and with the agricultural industry, that's really challenging as well. A port like Oakland is about a 50-50 port, so that's 50% export, 50% import. In addition to the tariffs, which I really appreciate that we're holding this discussion, and I appreciate the state's attention to the tariffs, but I would be remiss if I didn't point out all of the other things that the supply chain industry is facing right now as it relates to the federal government. So there's executive orders around shipbuilding and trying to bring shipbuilding back to the United States, which, to be fair, was a Biden-era USTR rule that was going through the process and has now come out, which would put a per voyage cost on any non-American made ship coming into port in the United States. We don't really make a lot of ships anymore. So there is not a large percentage of ships that are American made. So I think everybody kind of appreciates the effort of trying to, stand up that industry, but now there's a fee, a per voyage fee that's going to come in. That's going to be on a typical cargo, and it's also going to be on what we call ROROs, which is roll on, roll off, which is vehicles. So ports like San Francisco, ports like San Diego, ports like Waimea, that have a different way to absorb the tariffs because they have a different kind of cargo portfolio, are now going to be hit by some things that are coming out of USTR as it relates to shipbuilding. I think there's a lot of countries that are kind of stepping up in this moment in time and saying, especially on the ag piece, we do so much in California to feed the entire world. And there's a lot of countries looking at things like soybeans, looking at things like almonds, because of the unpredictability that we have right now, and saying we can step in and play that role. So I think we all kind of know how global this is and what the impacts are, but there is a lot of other things that we're dealing with that are coming down from the federal government right now, in addition to the tariffs, that are creating a lot of inconsistency. There's a number of buckets of money that we were able to get through the last administration, whether it be from infrastructure dollars or other programs that are really up in the air right now. And so again, we've got these big projects that we've been moving forward on, whether it's the Clean Port, the EPA Clean Ports money, money for arches, a lot of these different programs, and there's some unpredictability, particularly as we see the budget process going through Congress right now, and what is going to be zeroed out and what's going to happen when it gets over to the Senate. So, sorry, I know that was kind of like jumping around with a lot of different things, but it really is, the tariffs are one piece of it, and that's the piece that's getting a lot of attention, but it's really hard to kind of quantify what the impacts are going to be at any given moment because it's constantly changing, and because of this, it's planning. And so I'd be remiss in any conversation, when we're talking to the state, I want to make sure that everybody understands that that's one piece of it, but there is a lot of other things at stake right now too that are making it really hard for businesses to plan, and not just businesses that can work, right? It's projects. It's a lot of other things that are at play right now that makes it really hard for our industry to try to figure out what the next steps are.
I can actually tag on to that. I think in addition to the ship fees, there's also going to be proposed 100% tariff on ship-to-shore cranes and cargo handling equipment. So even building the infrastructure to support a shipbuilding industry or to reinvest in our existing goods movement industry is going to be hampered by that, increasing the costs of development tremendously. So I think, as we all know, even the state budget, every single aspect of our lives is at stake right now. The jobs, the income, access to essential goods, components to build American-made products, those are all on the table, and the damage is going to be profound and widespread.
I think both of you really articulate very profoundly the kind of risks that we are seeing from the economic chaos and that uncertainty, and that it is impossible for businesses to that capital investments require some certainty, and having that very clear tremendously helpful. Peter, you were.
Well, I was just going to say I want to change the focus a bit from the larger companies to small mom and pop businesses, which represent, of course, 60% of our state, and the uncertainty, of course, affects them. But when you have small businesses that operate on razor-thin margins, any fluctuation, any uncertainty is a death knell. It's not just hard, it's a death knell. And so we've already seen several businesses, small businesses, say, we just can't afford to do this anymore. The prices are driving us up. And when you combine that also with the fact that consumers are holding back a bit because of the prices and all of that, it's both factors coming into play. And one of the things that was said a few minutes ago, which I totally agree, is that we can't just look at the tariffs either. Everything is interrelated, especially on some of these policies. You have to understand that it isn't a light switch. You can't just say, oh, we're going to move manufacturing to America. It took decades to get to where we are to this kind of infrastructure. So to think that we're going to change overnight is impossible. And these are businesses that can't wait a month, let alone years, for things to settle out. And then when you throw into it the fact that many of these businesses are run by immigrants, are run by low-income people, and so on, where they use a lot of social services. The fact that all the money is being held up from social endeavors and nonprofits and so on. There's so many nonprofits I know that say we can't give out the dollars because we're not getting the dollars. And therefore, it's all interrelated. You run a business, you need to have child care. You need to have supportive services and so on. And then when those things are cut, again, you've hurt the people who cannot afford it.
Very well said. You know, I think I would add, I think the way things have really opened up by both Martha and Jennifer are really on point about the bigger landscape. And to bring it down to sort of the company level, I mean, one of the reasons the state's gotten to be the fourth largest economy is because there's actually been very robust growth in the manufacturing sector over the last 5 to 10 years. It's kind of been almost an undertold story because there's so many other things about our state's economy. But you know, just thinking about even the period leading up and during the pandemic, I know just in the East Bay alone, the manufacturing sector grew in terms of just jobs by about 10%, and it represents in the East Bay region about 30% of the gross regional product. So, you know, even though from an employment standpoint, its relative importance is a little bit lower, from an economic output standpoint, it's huge. And of course, it gets into the goods movement aspect and all the other things that are sort of tied to the fabric of our work. And so, right now, a lot of companies are struggling to make decisions about can they continue to invest, and they need to maybe if they're small mom and pops, then maybe it's time to sell or fold. You know, they're definitely not making investments in new sites or new equipment very much because of all the uncertainty. And so, the longer that sort of you know, that continues, I think the more we're going to see some other deleterious effects on everything, on jobs, on businesses, and on economic activity overall.
And to be fair, many of these companies just got through COVID. They just are coming out from the worst, you know, experience, you know, probably in the history of their company, right? They're just kind of back, staying afloat, and then this is happening.
Yeah, and kind of to Peter and Stephen's point, part of why we're such a large economy is because of the cultural authenticity of San Francisco and the kind of experience that people can have here by living here and that tourists can have here by visiting here. So these tariffs are impacting our small businesses. Many of them are immigrant-owned. Many of them are unable to source the things that they need to source in order to provide that cultural, authentic experience. And that is all interconnected. It goes back to the quality of life and the kind of uniqueness of San Francisco that's being hindered right now.
So firsthand from one company I'd like to mention is they started a company, 3 partners. They had grown this business to do very diverse food supply throughout, you know, the Bay Area and even nationally now. They had actually once wanted to consider diversification. You know, if we're going to do the China +1, what other markets can we import from? Now they can't even consider that. And even if they wanted to, and they have been considering to manufacture some of their products locally, but machines are made overseas. If you import the machines, you have to pay tariffs on that, and is that going to make sense for them? 2, raw materials that they're going to need to import. Not everything. We still have a lot of products here in California, but you're going to have to import, so the cost is going to increase. And most importantly, at the end of the day, they're going to have to think about, okay, do I have the labor, the trained labor that will help me run this factory? I would say those are some of the things that they're thinking of. But the immediate impact they're seeing already is, hey, I may have to furlough my staff. I don't know if I need to lay them off now, but furlough is definitely something that they have to be considering. And you talked about the impact, that is the immediate social impact.
Well, I'm a housing developer, and housing development, at least infill housing development, is very capital intensive. Investor interest in new projects is completely dried up. And part of that is because we're in a low margin business. It has a very sensitive schedule. That sensitive schedule is defined by our capital partners, both the equity and the debt. If we run into supply chain issues like we had during COVID, our loans lapse. Some developers ended up during COVID, giving their projects back to the banks. No bank wants that responsibility, so banks are tighter now with their lending requirements. At every turn that I look at when I'm trying to finance new development, I just see more hurdles than I see opportunities. So my company in particular has pulled back significantly from pursuing new projects. The impacts of this on our state and our country are profound in the sense that we already had a major housing supply problem. We're looking at turning the spigot off completely with these tariffs. And that's a very scary thing for a lot of younger generations. So I'm hoping we can come to some resolution quickly.
To follow on that, is the lack of investor interest, is that because of the larger uncertainty across the market, or is it because your own costs have gone up, or because there's unpredictability about what investment is going to look like? Do you have a sense?
Well, thousands of products go into an apartment building or a home. These products are sourced from all over the world. A lot of the raw materials do come from our country, but an equal amount of those products are foreign sourced or assembled in other countries. Our HVAC equipment, faucets, for example. We just don't have domestic sources to buy those parts. And the idea of ramping up a factory to build any one of those parts, who knows how long that will take. And in a building, it's not like I can build a house but not give somebody faucets, right? So I'm not going to start a project if I don't think I can get all the parts and pieces that go into a home. And right now, it's just really, really hard for me to imagine a circumstance where our country all of a sudden starts developing all of these things that we've been sourcing from the world for the last, decades.
Case in point, Tesla, 46% of the Tesla car, the parts are made overseas. I mean, think about the cost. I mean, I know we want to make more cars in America, but the fact of the matter is parts are made overseas. They come from Asian countries, and those countries, their products are getting taxed the most, right? Over ridiculously high rates versus Mexico at 10%. So I think that when it comes to manufacturing, then even though we want manufacturing to come back to the state of California, a lot of it may actually end up going in Canada or Mexico, because even though we have to pay tariffs on their products, it's only 10% versus 46 or versus 120%. So those are the things that may not really happen.
The risks to our exporters are also really high, that these relationships and sourcing take a long time, and they're very good relationships. And then when you have this type of volatility, people will source elsewhere. So for example, soybeans were sourced in Brazil, and shelled nuts were sourced from Australia. We don't know if that business will come back. And what type of incentive do our foreign partners have to engage in such volatility?
Yeah, I think those are both great points. And back to what Darlene was saying just a minute ago, I think that one of the reasons that the manufacturing success story in California is that it's been very high value. And it's been high value because of the way supply chains are wired and set up so that the real high value activity and product can be made here. And so, the cascading effects run all the way through the value chain, and that's where, why we're here, is because it's, the way that the ripple effects of all this are going to permeate in ways that I think we can try to anticipate, but still not fully understand until we're almost there.
I want to stress that, California, one of the reasons why we've been able to grow is because we're such a diverse state, and we're very welcoming of anyone from anywhere in the world. And as a result, I like to say that a lot of immigrants, especially immigrants, are very scrappy, and they're very entrepreneurial, and they'll start a business and they'll go away. What I've seen also is, already, is that there's a decline in foreign students coming into California. I want to point out, and a lot of people don't understand that, one, foreign students pay their full ride. Tuition, they pay 100% of tuition. There's no government subsidies, which are great for the government, right? And also great for the school. One. Two, with foreign students, if the students are happy, the parents follow and they make investments. They start by buying a house, then they start looking at business opportunities, and then from there businesses grow. I think that because of the instability and also the selective immigration policies that are coming from DC now, that students, the parents are afraid to send their children here to study, and then as a result, the investments will not grow. And I think that that really hurts us. We don't see it, but there really is a huge impact there. And, investment in housing, right, in the projects, because I have seen a lot of ground-up developments, they are being funded by money from overseas. Because, hey, my child, I'm going to give her or him, $2.5 million, what I like using that number, but $2.5 million and, put it in a fund and they can invest it wherever they want. And then look at opportunities like this. It's like 18 months, I get my investment back with a good return. Why not? And that is how a lot of small to medium-sized projects are being funded and financed now, or in the
Andrew, can you talk a little bit more about that sort of housing? I completely agree with your observation about the massive supply challenge that California has had, and policymakers have been hard at work trying to identify pathways for more expedited housing, more streamlined housing, buy right housing to build faster. Maybe some of those policies are things that you worked on that have helped some of your projects, and then the tariffs. What does it mean right now to housing projects that are new ones seeking to be greenlit, or maybe ones that are midstream? Is there a pause on all projects, or are people treading carefully? What's the real concrete impact?
Different investors have different risk profiles, I should say. So I'm going to speak a little bit more generally. These tariffs are, well, the numbers that I look at are the Fed's numbers. To build expensive projects, you need to borrow money, and that's controlled by the Federal Reserve's monetary policy. These tariffs have now basically surpassed the Federal Reserve's sort of responsibility of controlling lending rates. And if you look at the bond markets now, the bond markets are reacting to these tariffs, and that is a scary thing. Our credit rating, our federal credit rating, seems to have gone down. Much like our foreign products come from overseas, so too does investment. And if people are less likely to invest in the United States, that just affects everyone. It's harder for me. That trickles down to the project scale. It's hard to be specific here because these are big, abstract issues that we're still trying to grapple with. But it's problematic.
What are you doing on your projects? Are you holding for now?
I canceled the project because my money is at risk first, and if I don't think investors will follow me, I'm throwing my money away. And I'm a smaller developer. I don't have the ability to carry the hope of a project for a long time. And so it's better for me to sit on the sidelines and wait for a better environment to invest.
Was that a housing project in San Francisco?
It was, sorry, I'm from San Diego. And so, no, it wasn't. But it was a housing project in San Diego.
And I can speak for the South Bay, when you have tech companies that are trying to expand and, there's a demand for workers and so on. And we were very active in terms of getting the housing element passed and revised in certain ways to again say it's one thing to say we've set aside this land to be developed. It's another thing to actually have it pencil out so that you can build it. And we have so many of our developers who are still on hold because they're just razor thin trying to make it pencil out, make the projects pencil out. And now they don't at all. And so when we sit there and we say, and we've said it in the housing element, we are committed to building so many units and all that, we can't meet those promises. We can't meet those obligations.
And that will have a follow-on effect.
Absolutely.
On companies, large, mid-size, small.
Everyone. Yeah.
Because their employees won't have that. Stephen, I'm curious, representing manufacturing, domestic manufacturing here, and East Bay manufacturing, so much of the narrative that we hear is that tariffs will instantly inspire investment in domestic manufacturing. What does it look like on the ground for your companies?
Well, a couple of, someone or many folks here already pointed out that, these kinds of investments, these take years to build up. I mean, the story of the manufacturing sector in the U.S., a lot of these industries that are abroad that some folks have the notion might come back here somehow, really almost magically, are very low-value products. They were offshored in the 80s and 90s, and we're talking literally decades ago. And that's actually what's allowed American manufacturing to grow, is because the lower value things aren't done here, and so they keep costs lower so that the higher value activity can happen here. And so, the supply chain's finite. There's not an infinite number of suppliers, obviously. So where people go when you start having very blanket approaches around tariffs and other factors, really just it increases cost, of course, and that in turn just will decrease investment, and ultimately it'll put a lot of companies out of business. I mean, the small ones, a couple folks have said that the businesses that are really most at risk are these very small mom and pop businesses, which really dominate the sector as a whole across the state. And the bigger ones will find their way through for sure. They'll navigate it, but it won't also be without pain passed on to the consumer. So I mean, and then of course, what's happening in the financial markets then just adds another layer to all of that.
Kind of to Stephen's point, the costs are passed on to the consumer, but then some of the consumers are just regular working people, and there's this narrative around tariffs about how they protect American jobs, and we're going to get instant manufacturing here, and people are going to be rehired, but the truth is in San Francisco we have our baristas and we have our bartenders, and San Franciscans really enjoy this kind of access to these services, and these people have a livelihood to uphold, so these costs are going to be detrimental to them being able to keep their jobs and the businesses being able to hire them and keep their employment.
I just want to say that we've been talking a lot about manufacturing and other traditional areas, but we haven't mentioned healthcare. And we have a number of institutions that are sizable but have long-term contracts. And they're long-term contracts with international suppliers. In fact, some of the world-class equipment that's being used in some of our world-class facilities can only be purchased overseas. So now we're talking about putting lives at risk.
We're talking medical devices, pharmaceuticals?
Yes, absolutely.
Saline bags. I remember there's a shortage of saline, shortage of syringes. I used to be in the industry 10 years in bio, and I'm telling you, every single antibiotic that is being prescribed, like Kaiser, right? And all the antibiotics are made in China. Everything. So when you get sick, the cost of healthcare is going to go through the roof.
It's already through the roof.
Yeah. And we may not
further through the roof.
Further through the roof already.
Well, Darlene, it's not just about cost, it's about access.
Yes, access.
We may not even be
Right.
able to
Right.
address some of those
Right.
issues.
Right. We do not have the capability to make even the glass, the glass vials, something as simple as that.
Yeah.
It's crazy. No pennies.
So no, in the conversation already, we have heard a lot about not only the tariffs, but also some of the other impacts of what we are seeing come out of the federal administration. Right now, the impact on international students and on immigrant communities, which is particularly important and vital to the California economy, Bay Area economy, Southern California economy, the economic impacts, the per wage costs, and other impacts of a variety of economic policies that we are seeing come out of the federal administration, even aside from the bear of the chaotic tariffs, and the impact of gutting social services, and some of what we are seeing as follow-on impacts there. I'm curious to hear from all of you, what are some of the other impacts of other federal administration policies beyond tariffs on the way of life for businesses that are trying to invest, employ, and serve here in California?
I think we touched on that a little bit in terms of access to materials and equipment, the ability to invest in advanced plan. If you want to open a business and it requires equipment, you're having second thoughts right now, or you're trying to figure out when is the best time to purchase this before a tariff goes into place. Will that tariff actually go into place? When will it go? You know, there's a lot of considerations. So I think that all Californians are going to be affected by development or lack thereof. I think we'd be remiss in not, acknowledging the housing construction needs in Southern California right now as they rebuild from the fires. They need everything from new stoves to shingles on their homes.
So many of which, as we heard from Andrew, are made overseas. And we don't have the magic domestic capacity to be providing those.
Even if we want to, bolster home employed, if you will, homegrown talent and all of that, we're cutting into that as well. We have so many of our population who don't want to show up publicly because they're worried they're going to be deported. We have so many schools that are cutting back on their funding or not receiving funding. And so we're not educating who we have right here locally. There's so many companies that sit there and say, I can't hire fast enough, I can't hire locally enough, and this is at all levels. And so when you cut off development of that base, where are they going to come from?
And when you talk about manufacturing and about actually getting it set up, it's not that nobody wants to manufacture back on U.S. soil, but the thing is the fact that it takes, one example, I had a company, it was a company in San Francisco, they co-work space, right, for food tech actually, and innovation. They had imported an extruder into the United States and in San Francisco. It took them 6 months to get a permit to start operating. Okay. And if that's only to bring the machine in, what about getting a building permitted? What about getting plans permitted? That's going to take, 18 months, 24 months at least before it can even break down. So what happens in here?
Also in that vein of advanced planning, if the billions of dollars in taxes that our industries generate, that has direct effect on the state budget, which then you're seeing cuts to the state's ability to invest and to attract.
Well, any loss, I work in an industry that needs a lot of permits. And any time you lose government workers that are part of that flow, and it adds delay to the process of getting an approval, it adds one extra layer of unpredictability and yet one more reason not to invest in a housing project. So when we lose these public service workers that are helping getting approvals, it's one more way that I can't move a project forward.
When we talk about economic vitality, we often talk about California being the place where ideas come to grow. And we talk about, we are creative in our solutions and all of this sort of thing. With the tariffs, we're becoming a country of no. We can't do this. No, we don't have the resources. No, we can't invest. We have to cancel projects and so on.
And in a perfect world, in a different economic time and a different budget year for California, it would be wonderful to see California, given, the gravitas that it has as the fourth largest economy, to be able to come in and supplement. So for all of this, we want to set up more manufacturing. Well, the administration's doing the writing here at Six Sticks, or that's typically how you do that, right? So especially on a lot of these clean energy projects that came out of the Biden administration, some of the investments that they made, many of those, because that process took so long, now, right when they're looking at ramping up, it's not a time to do that, right? And so in a perfect world, it would be wonderful if the state could come in and try to help fill the gap, but we're not in a position to do that right now. And based on, what we rely on as a state of California, IPOs, capital gains, all of those things, it doesn't look like it's going to get better, but it gets worse, so that is making everyone pause. Like I said at the beginning, people aren't rushing out to buy, a bunch of goods, that they're importing to get in front of the tariffs, because the tariffs are like this, it's a 90-day pause, it's a negotiation with a certain country, it's, so there's so much movement now internationally between other countries, to Jen's point, filling in the gaps, and these things take a long time. People are making very hasty, quick decisions in the meantime to invest with other partners. It is going to take a long time for that to come back, because those decisions, typically you don't have to make those decisions in such a quick manner, and that is happening right now. But these are relationships that we've been investing in for decades. So one thing that I think I do appreciate that the state has done, and I think this administration has done, is trying to say California is open for business, and we do want to have international relationships. We are the fourth largest economy, so we can say that, and it's actually really meaningful to be able to say, hey Canada, we want to work with you. We're still your partner, and so understanding the budget, constraints that we're under right now, I think that direct diplomacy is really helpful and important, and that's something that this administration does really well, and that this governor does really well.
Great.
So, trying to find something that we can also work on and do and put our energy into, and I think that is one of the things that we're trying to fill out.
Can I make sure I understand something that I think I heard, that some of these export-import relationships take lots of time to build, but can be destroyed overnight? There's almost like a disproportionate time relationship to the building of it and the cultivating of it, and then the destruction of it. Is it so some of these years long, I don't know, maybe decades long relationships, you think they could end and then never come back?
I think when you think about the current environment around just the chaos of the tariff piece, the disinvestment that someone alluded to in terms of the federal investment, and then its direct impact on things like clean energy, education, immigration. A third of Silicon Valley is foreign born. I mean, our innovation economy is driven by a lot of different elements that are all sort of under attack. And it's really it's timely that we're having this conversation, because we really do need to find ways to push through.
And to bring it back to San Francisco a little bit, it's no secret that we're a tourism-reliant city, and y'all may have heard about the doom loop and this terrible media narrative that we are receiving, and folks are somewhat scared to come here, whether it's from the United States or from abroad. So to your point about immigration policy, this is an added layer on top of the narrative that already exists, and now it's branching out from San Francisco to the United States, and it's affecting our high-skilled labor and also our general labor as well. And last but not least, we do have a few large-scale sporting events coming to California, and there's a very real question of visas and how that's going to look for our visitors, and the infrastructure that will need to be built, and how we're going to be able to pull that off.
All in very short time. I also heard, Peter, in particular, you've underscored this point, but I think it is quite relevant for everyone around the table, and I appreciate any further thoughts, that the cutting of social services and Head Start cuts and the kinds of support systems that our economy across the board relies on to enable people to work and care for their children and their families, and enables businesses to thrive. those federal cuts and the state doing what we can, but we are mighty here as the fourth largest economy in the world, but we are not a federal government, not able to fill in all the gaps there. What sort of impacts are you seeing, or are your businesses seeing from the uncertainty about the availability of the broad education and social services network and other social services and community-based supports?
Well, I think you've said it well, Eleanor, that it really is, it affects every aspect. It affects workforce development, it affects the ability of people to even come to work, it affects, the engine that keeps all of our businesses going. And again, they are so interrelated. It's the age-old adage of, if I have a flat tire going to work, I'm due, because I'll now be late for work, I may be laid off. And if I'm laid off, I can't afford my house. And if I can't afford my house, where do my kids go, and so on and so forth. And then throw in food insecurity and so on. And one of the things about the Bay Area specifically is that we've been very, very good and very, very sensitive to our most vulnerable. And our social services, are everywhere. And not only are they everywhere, but different industries as well as different institutions depend on them being there and being functional. And so if you take away major sources of funding, you're killing them. And more importantly is that a lot of these organizations are resilient, creative, and yes, their investors will say, oh my goodness, let's put some more money in. We saw that certainly during the pandemic. But they can't do it forever. And again, if their businesses are under assault, they're going to have to make some hard calls.
Well, thank you all. The collective insights from around this table, I think, are tremendously powerful, from housing to the tech industry to our ports and shipping, manufacturing, and our large, small, and medium businesses across San Francisco and around the state. I think really powerful insights into what's happening here in the Bay Area and across California, as we are all grappling with this chaotic and rapidly changing economic environment that we are working in here. As we close, I want to hand it back to Attorney General Bonta to share a few thoughts here with you all, and just say myself, I so appreciate you all taking the time to share your experience and your business's experience and your partner's experiences with us.
Yeah, I want to express my appreciation as well. Thank you for the candor, the directness. It's needed, necessary, it's helpful for us as we continue our work. We need to know what's happening in your worlds, with your businesses, with the workers, with the mom and pops, with your industries, and so this has been very helpful. One thing that really stood out for me was sort of the interconnectedness of a lot of different sectors, different policies, and not just the tariffs, impacting the costs of to do business, and maybe that being passed on to consumers, but the worsening of our and exacerbating of our housing crisis, and this idea that we need to build 2 to 3 million more units of housing, and we weren't on pace before. We're definitely not now, and or just putting it into stark terms, lives are at stake, health is at stake when it comes to healthcare, and not being able to get the medicines or the devices or the equipment that we need to take care of people at the standard that we hope for. Or government employees that need to do permits in a high permitting industry like yours, Andrew. So, there's all these different components to it. But like some of the words that really stood out to me that are, just really painful to hear, talking about, sell or shut down, furloughing, canceling a project. That's real stuff, and it's happening now. And so, I thank you for sharing it with us, and it makes us even more motivated in a place where we are already highly motivated to tackle these unlawful tariffs and make sure the damage that are delivering on California and our business communities, so that we can stop them and block them. I'd be remiss if I didn't share my own observation that this administration was one that talked about lowering costs on day one, talked about being the administration that was going to be great for the economy. And, you know, I think your own lived experiences and those of the people that are your members that rely on you show the opposite, unfortunately. So we want to make California the best place to live and work, start a business, grow a business. You know, right now it seems like folks are in survival mode. There's no, you know, startup plans. There's no growth or expansion plans. It's survive if you can, and some can't. And so that stark fine point on it is really painful, but also meaningful for us as we continue our work. So for me, as someone with the honor and privilege of being in elected office, the most important thing to me to fuel my work and drive me forward has been hearing people's own authentic words, their own personal experiences. And when they share an injustice or a wrong or a problem that I can help fix, it motivates me even more. So consider me highly motivated. But thank you for spending the time with us today on a Friday and taking the time out of your busy days. I know your communities and your businesses need you, but this is very helpful for us. So again, with a lot of appreciation. Thank you for a wonderful discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I know.
Okay. Yeah, okay. I'm sorry.
You know, it looked better. It would look better if you had to stand here and we shoot this way, so you got the swallow here.
I know, I wanted that, but this is what they want.
You can't block the other entrance to the other office there, so.
We're going to move this table out of the way, unless you wanted your shot.
Yeah, okay. It's the same order that we were in before. Let's, here, we can slide. Yeah, slide it back. This time? You're right, yeah. Never mind, yeah. All of them.
Yeah, if I can.
I know, yeah. Just you guys have to go.
Oh, here we go. Sorry, they locked us out.
You want to come around this way?
Oh, I do, yeah.
Yeah, sorry, we go to the right.
Don't worry about it.
Just trying to get it that way.
I'm going to tell you.
No. Oh, we're going over here now.
Yeah, we had to switch.
You like the flag?
What's that?
You like the flag?
No, we just did blocking the government. Yeah, sure.
Hold on a second, I'm not even there.
We got time.
Yeah, that's the problem with live transmission.
Are any of those folks willing to chat with us after?
Check, 1, 2.
I believe so, yes, but I'll check with Deanna to confirm.
Would you mind, I'm so sorry, I'm trying to get the focus for him. Can you look, thank you.
Keep going with the incandescent. Check, 1, 2, testing. Thanks everyone for being here. Light's good, it looks like.
Yes,
Test. Sam, how's your focus?
We got
Sam? It's good?
sound.
Yeah, 1 second.
Test, 1, 2, 3. Check. Hello.
Thank you.
Nina is, I had a question over here.
Still working.
Everybody good? No?
Everybody's good?
Cool, okay.
Thumbs up.
Awesome.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that's right. No blurs. No, I know. And that. No blurs. It's all right. All the rest of them dead. What's up, Luke? I can't depend on that battery. That battery lasted for 45 minutes of hard wiring. Well, that 9 volt is on its last leg, I think. After you get this out. I've lost a 9 volt in the middle of a press conference, and it's not fun.
AA rechargeable.
Oh, they're even worse.
Oh, great.
No, it's too. I'm just saying 9 volt. Just throw it in. AA, you're struggling with too. Twice as hard.
I've been preloaded in a little container. So
Oh, do you really?
I did
I
not.
love it. Oh, so you turned it into a 9 volt. Technically.
Yeah, basically, yeah.
Try not to step on your back.
Nice.
Okay, this package. Thanks, Steve. I know it's. I know it's. And I think when I went by you, I was like, you better give me that cut. Better put me in your story. That was the Nintendo. Yeah.
Last Friday, right?
Yeah. It was a mess.
So what do you cover? The economy. So broad. And I did a lot of insurance crisis coverage, like referral
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm actually writing a tariff story that I was going to turn in today, but after this, I'm going to have to. Yeah.
It's like it's all the stuff that.
What about you?
I never cast.
Okay.
It's only one side.
Oh my gosh. I mean, I feel like I'm always. I work for the Mercury News Film, so I have a lot of stuff comes out of here.
People can dress up like it's not.
Super. I mean, all of it. Being in California, there's always something you can find. You know.
Yeah. I was in India before, and that's where like I was out there. It's very, very, very different. Especially what's going on, like very, very different.
I don't know. I don't play, but I
Yeah, that's one thing I don't miss about it. Companies will talk to you when they want you to learn something, or when they want to see something. But usually, like if it's, they won't go below certain. It's very like access driven. So it's politics. It's what do you do?
We both have these top lights are extraordinarily bright. Look at that.
Oh, yeah, okay.
They are just speaking out again, like when they want to, right? When they want to share.
Yeah.
Like you can't just kind of fiddle your thumbs and like not say anything else. Like there's no way to there's no more
They're impressive.
urgency they feel about it.
They're industrial strength. I mean, this thing's been on the camera for 17 years. And it used to be an incandescent bulb. Now they make
For example, like talking to Google executives, right, and having the comms person, and like he looked really frustrated that he was like muzzling technologies, you know, like he could sort of feel, because it was like I remember this was like a face-to-face thing. This one it was like a face-to-face thing, and like I could.
But seriously, this thing lasts in the rain and the wind.
Felt muzzled by the fact that she was right there.
Yes.
And
They
she
laugh like, then they start turning yellow.
Yes.
There you go.
Yeah, it was just.
Hi there. Good evening, everyone. Good afternoon, everybody. Rob Bonta, California Attorney General. Thanks for joining us for our roundtable with impacted businesses here in California, harmed and hurt by the tariffs. It was important for us to hear directly from various industry sectors and businesses across our state who are suffering from these tariffs that are unlawful. And we wanted to have a roundtable where we could hear directly from them, hear their stories and their impacts. And it was devastating to hear what they share. The fact that someone who does infill development, that's his job. He builds housing. We need housing. We have a massive housing shortage in California, supply problem. He's trying to address it, and he's had to cancel at least one project and is very uncertain about any future projects because of the tariffs. We heard about mom and pops who are struggling to stay open and are facing the reality of shuttering or selling. We're hearing about companies who need to furlough their workers, who can't get the workers that they need because the high-skilled labor supply chain is impacted by the tariffs. We're hearing about healthcare quality going down because of lack of access to critical medicines, pharmaceuticals, medical supplies, equipment to provide the care that is necessary. We've heard about the cuts to social services impacting the economy, mom and pops who need childcare, and those cuts impacting their ability to have a successful business. Also hearing about the cuts to our government services, including employees who provide permitting to make projects go. So one of the most interesting aspects of the conversation was around the interconnectedness of the different parts of the tariffs impact, and how there's the direct impact, of course, on raising the costs of businesses, and those costs being passed on to consumers, but just a wide array of damage that the business community in California is suffering from. So I'm grateful for the opportunity to have this roundtable to hear directly from those who've been impacted by these tariffs. The governor and I, on behalf of the state of California, have taken a very strong stand against these tariffs. We believe they're unlawful. And we filed a suit, the first lawsuit of any state challenging these tariffs, the tariffs that were brought under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, the IEEPA. That is a statute that does not provide the president the authority to impose a tariff. The word tariff does not exist in that statute. That statute has never been used in the history of its existence to impose any tariff on any other nation, much less imposing a tariff, using that authority to impose a tariff on every one of our trade partners. over 200 nations. So we believe strongly in the merits of that lawsuit. We are continuing to press our case right here in the Northern District of California. We brought a preliminary injunction seeking an order for now while the case proceeds to stop these tariffs that are hurting California and Californians and California businesses. We have a hearing next month on that case. And I'd be remiss if I didn't point out that this is an administration that went out of its way to talk about how it was going to deliver to the American people when it came to the economy, to the cost of living, that it was going to lower the cost of living on day one. We are over 100 days in, and costs are skyrocketing. Costs are going up, not down. Businesses and the economy that this president thought that he was going to improve and make stronger, he's turning into a tailspin. And we all know the impacts of these tariffs. The projections are that there is going to be over $100 billion in economic output that we're going to lose year after year. That's nationally. Slightly lower numbers for California. We know that inflation is going to be going up because of these tariffs. The costs for everyday American households going up by thousands of dollars a year. We've also seen that the worst two-day period in the history of our stock market. So that's what these tariffs have done. And we're not going to stand by as the fourth largest economy in the world. Nearly 40 million people in this great state of California, a place where we are proud that we are the biggest importer of any state, the second largest exporter of any state, the largest exporter when it comes to ag, the largest manufacturer. Our economy is a tentpole in the American economy. And we're not going to stand by while the president unlawfully seeks to impose tariffs that hurt our economy. And because of our outsized economy, we've suffered an outsized economic impact. And grateful to be able to, again, hear more from those impacted by the tariffs, which only motivates us more and makes us more resolute in our commitment to advancing this lawsuit and getting a court order blocking these tariffs. So with that, I can open up to any questions that you might have. And
Mr. Attorney General.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
It's interesting to note that tariffs are on products and goods. They're not on services. Is there a legal theory that you can advance that basically says that the federal government is attacking the service business through the tariffs, which you say are illegal to begin with? But another cause of action is that the service industries, whether it's supported both one that supports 98,000 jobs or it's a hospital, whatever service you want to talk about, this is an illegal act that has far greater impact because it affects many more people, much more of the economy, since we are basically a service economy.
I mean, that's perhaps the biggest takeaway from the conversation that we just had today is the widespread nature of the impacts from these tariffs. The fact that they are indiscriminate and scattershot and impact everybody in every industry, whether you're a worker or a patient, whether you're someone seeking housing, whether you rely on goods or you are seeking services. Our economy is interconnected, and the tariffs impact everyone. So absolutely, people who provide services rely on goods, on products to deliver their services, and those are impacted by the tariffs. So it is a fallacy to think, and I know you're not suggesting this, that the service industry is somehow immune from the tariffs. They are directly impacted. Everyone is, which is the point. They are devastating, up and down our economy through every part of our society. And so that point was made very clear today with some really devastating examples.
Mr. Attorney General, I'm curious, Supreme Court justices recently seemed apprehensive about a federal judge's ability to issue a nationwide injunction that was separately in the birthright citizenship case. But how could that possible ruling, if they decide that national injunctions cannot be used, how could that impact the remedies you're seeking in this case on the tariffs lawsuit?
We've never argued, and we don't argue, that a nationwide injunction is appropriate in every case. We have also never argued that it's never appropriate. We believe nationwide injunctions are appropriate in the right circumstances, in the right scenario, in the right case. For example, in the birthright citizenship case, where at issue is a U.S. constitutional right that applies to everyone in the United States, a nationwide injunction is very appropriate because everyone deserves that right, not just the people who live in the states, which happen to be blue states, where the Democratic Attorneys General decided to fight for them and to protect their rights and defend their rights, but that somehow the people who live in red states, where those Attorneys General didn't bother to protect the constitutional rights of the people in their state, didn't fight for them, that would make no sense. And I think that became clear in the U.S. Supreme Court argument last week from some of the questions. I think how you can administer something like a constitutional right without a nationwide injunction, I think was a topic that was raised in that argument. So we think that the tariffs is another place where it affects everyone nationwide. So I think a nationwide injunction is appropriate here. Maybe the U.S. Supreme Court will create a set of conditions or a sort of a thought matrix for how they determine when a nationwide injunction applies and when it doesn't. But that would be very consistent with what we've always argued. When there's an issue that applies uniformly nationwide and a nationwide injunction is appropriate, we should be able to seek and secure one. Perhaps in other circumstances, not. So, but tariffs, tariffs are between nations. So a nationwide injunction is very appropriate here as well. So we would make that argument, and we would hope that the court would find that argument compelling.
One piece of feedback you got today from the business leaders was that they appreciated the state's direct diplomacy with foreign leaders. Can you share a progress update on the state's talks with other countries, and do you expect a deal or announcement to come soon out of that?
You know what? The governor has been great on this. So all credit in this space to Governor Gavin Newsom. This is his role. This is something he should be doing, and he is doing. He's reaching out directly to foreign leaders, leaders of other nations in Canada, in Europe, longtime partners of ours with whom we've cultivated and built strong relationships over many years, decades. And he is telling them that these tariffs don't represent California. And he's right in saying that. We want good relationships. We want to have good trade partners. We want to continue great trade relationships into the future. We are the fourth largest economy in the world, and when we say that, that means something. So Governor Newsom has been hard at work with that direct diplomacy, talking directly to other nations' leaders, trading partners' leaders, and letting them know that California is open for business. We want to import, export relationship with you. We want to trade with you. We want to continue the great relationship that we have, and I think that's meaningful because maybe there's a belief that all the states are on board with these tariffs, and we're not. They're unlawful for sure, which is why we're bringing our lawsuit, and they're also bad policy that are devastating California businesses and communities.
Mr. Attorney General, thank you for holding the roundtable today with your team and business leaders. What do you say to those that support tariffs, saying that this is, the economic downturn could be a rough period, but in the end it would strengthen the U.S. economy, and these tariffs are reciprocal for those tariffs that are imposed on the U.S.?
I tell them that the data doesn't lie. Look at it. Look at the evidence. Listen to the businesses who are impacted by them. Listen to the mom and pops. Listen to the consumers whose costs are going up and are struggling with inflation, who are screaming and have been screaming, lower my costs, don't raise them. Just look at the data. Everywhere you look, the answer is the same. The tariffs are devastating. The tariffs are unlawful. The tariffs are bad policy. So this idea that, hey, just suffer, and maybe one day, someday, maybe, it'll get better, is cold comfort. And there's no confidence in that. This is, these tariffs are providing the opposite of what the business community always craves and deserves and needs. They want predictability. They want certainty. They want a plan. They want to have confidence that they can have long-term investments, that they can have a startup, that they can grow, that they can expand. They're getting none of that right now. They're getting the opposite. And as was shared very appropriately and pointedly in today's conversation, these are businesses that are emerging from perhaps the worst business experience in their life when it comes to COVID, which, as we improved health and saved lives, many businesses suffered. And as they recover, they deserve support and certainty, predictability, and a pathway to be able to get back on their feet and to emerge and be strong, not be slapped in the face with tariffs that prevent their forward progress and that harm their ability to be successful. So I'm aware of the argument, and I say look at the data, look at the evidence. It's undeniable and indisputable.
It strikes me that what you're doing here, there's two efforts. One is legal, the other is listening, but also listening in public. Can you talk a little bit about what you're trying to do by inviting us as well as the business leaders?
Yeah, I'm an attorney and honored to be one. Also, elected a leader who represents real people, everyday folks, Californians, mom and pops, people who started a business with a dream, who are struggling to run a business, who are trying to pay for college for their kids and eggs and groceries and gas and healthcare and housing. And there's a legal story to everything that we do, and there's a everyday person story to everything that we do. And sometimes those are both presented to courts. That's what amicus briefs are for. They provide perspectives of people who are impacted by the legal issue that the court is looking at. And so today was sort of was an opportunity to look at real everyday impacts. Sometimes we can talk about the International Emergency Economic Powers Act. We can talk about Congress's ability to tax and impose tariffs that don't belong to the executive branch. We can talk about these big numbers, how many billions of dollars the national economy will lose. But to me, it's always most important to hear from everyday folks. Make it real. See what is really happening on the street, on the ground in California. And we heard it today in people's own voices. It wasn't us filtering it and telling, what we thought. You heard directly from them, and we wanted you to have an insight into that as, reporters appropriately cover the tariff story, its impacts, the legal challenges to it. I think it's very important also to have the story of everyday folks and their impacts on them.
If I could follow up, like you said, you're an attorney, not an economist or a business owner or business representative. But maybe you could imagine if you were able to get a preliminary injunction at, following the hearing next month, what would that look like?
A preliminary injunction?
Yeah. What would it provide the stability that these businesses crave?
It would end the tariffs. It would end the pain. Obviously, and that's the goal. So the tariffs that we're challenging, the tariffs authorized under the IEEPA over the tariffs applied to all of our trading partners, over 200 countries, we are seeking a declaration and that they are unlawful and an order that they cannot be continue to be implemented. And so I think that will be widely applauded by the business community, by the consumers, by California, by all nations. And honestly, I think that the states that don't bother to bring lawsuits, they're cheering for us silently. They know that they were going to ride on our coattails and enjoy the benefits of what we fight for, and that the people, the businesses that are in their red states where they're not bothering to fight for them are going to benefit from the nationwide injunctions that we secure. So this would give immediate relief with an order ending those tariffs. Of course, I'm well aware that there's appeals and multiple steps to the litigation process. And so, there could be a reversal and then there could be an affirmation later down the road. So, but ending the tariffs and having a court order at any point, including when, if we secure our preliminary injunction, which I believe we will, I think will be very helpful to our business community.
So if they appeal, the stock market might bounce more.
It could. So, and that's, again, and this is driven by the tariffs. This is driven by Trump. He imposed the tariffs, which leads to the challenges, which leads to the litigation process, which leads to the uncertainty and the unpredictability.
Attorney General, this sort of goes back to the first question that you were asked. I wonder if there's anything you heard today that would inform a different lawsuit, because the lawsuit that you filed is based on the lawfulness, or the unlawfulness that you think the tariffs were imposed under. But
what about the harms, the economic harms that everyone talked about today? Is there any grounds for a different, separate lawsuit that would be related to the tariffs, but not necessarily to the argument that you've presented so far?
We bring cases when an action has been taken that's unlawful and it hurts the state of California. And we looked at all of the tariffs that were imposed by the Trump administration, and we brought the lawsuit that we brought because we believe that the tariffs imposed under the IEEPA are unlawful. We don't bring lawsuits when all we have is political grievance or ideological or policy difference. We won't, and a court will throw us out immediately. We got to bring the goods. We have to bring facts in the law that show that the law has been broken. So that's what we've done here. And what we've heard inside, I think, could be very important to a court in understanding the impacts of these tariffs as they decide the legality. I think some of what we heard would be very appropriate for an amicus brief, a friend of the court brief, for businesses to say, here are the impacts on us. We just want you to know. As businesses impacted by these tariffs, here's what the impacts are. And so I think that's how the stories that you heard inside that room might emerge and be part of a court case, not necessarily a different case, but as part of the understanding the impacts of these tariffs as the legality of them is considered by a court.
And we want to get your
time for one or two more questions.
quickly wanted to get your reaction from two headlines from the Trump administration today. The president is ordering Apple to move manufacturing to the U.S., which is related to this. And then secondly, it appears the Trump administration is also moving forward with its plans for Alcatraz. Some officials from the Federal Bureau of Prisons were visiting it, plan to return. Is that something that California would fight back against or can?
So the statement about Apple is something that is obviously disappointing from my perspective, but very unsurprising, very predictable. It is exactly what he does. It's almost like he wakes up in the morning and says, hey, I think Apple should build more Apple phones. And so maybe I'll tell their CEO that he should do that. And then maybe tomorrow he wakes up and he says, hey, I was just kidding. I have a different view. Or maybe I'm going to turn my attention to someone else who I want to impose tariffs on. Maybe Hollywood's not making me happy today, and they need to have a tariff on Hollywood, which is a true thing that he said. So it's how he operates. It's how his brain works, unfortunately. And it's exactly what the American people and the American business community do not need. They don't need the chaos. They don't need the confusion. They don't need the uncertainty. They don't need the unpredictability. They don't need the blatant and transparent political aspects of it. Why does he impose a tariff against Hollywood? Because he doesn't think Hollywood supports him, because it has a lot of Democrats that support other candidates. That's not how you make good policy. That's not a thoughtful way to lead the greatest nation on the history of the earth and to be a leader for all Americans. He's targeting some and weaponizing his authority to harm certain groups and certain people and certain industries. So this is yet another example of that, unfortunately. On Alcatraz, I thought it was a joke when I saw it the first time. And who knows? It doesn't seem like serious policy. I honestly thought he saw The Rock, that movie with Sean Connery and Nick Cage, and then said, hey, why don't we open up that prison again, because that's how he thinks. Maybe he's real, maybe it's real, who knows? I think they have, as a lot of the stories that you've shared and people have uncovered, there's massive infrastructure problems for how to have an operational facility there for what he wants to do with it. Again, that's classic Trump, not thought through, half-baked, off-the-cuff statement that just seems to be an unfiltered way his brain works. But okay, he has people coming to look at it, see what they say.
If the Trump administration's plan was, it seems to be, throw everything you can on every subject all at one time, is it not fair for the states to return the favor by saying, for example, that tariffs are not the supreme law of the land, civil rights are, like the right to make a living and things like that, or that it's an illegal tax on services because it's illegal the way he has done it, or that it's a states' rights issues, that those powers not granted to the federal government, the enumerated government, are into the States. Is it not maybe a better approach to throw the same stuff at the Trump administration as they've thrown at everyone else and see how they react?
You know, it is their strategy. It's been stated. It's not a secret. This idea of flood the zone, chaos and confusion, shock and awe, and their actions have been consistent with that strategy. The volume of executive orders and other department and agency actions has been much greater than in Trump 1.0. So it's a strategy that they've telegraphed. It's a strategy that they're following. I will say, as someone who's been looking at every action that they take to assess its legality, the quality of their action is poor in terms of its adherence with the law. We've sued the president 22 times in over 16 weeks, more than once a week, prevailing, at least preliminarily, in most of those cases where a court independently assesses the action of the federal government and says, you're likely to succeed on the merits, California, so we're going to stop this action, at least for now. So don't understand volume for efficacy or quality. It's a lot of not well thought through, not legally supported, and not lawful actions that we're able to stop in court. Yesterday we got an important injunction on a Department of Education reduction in force. Yet another win for states pushing back. So what's appropriate, I believe, is to make a commitment to the California people, which I've made, which is that each and every time the president breaks the law and hurts California, I will sue him in court and stop him. And that's what we're doing. And we are definitely considering all of our arguments. The 10th Amendment, which you've just cited, which is our Constitution, the part of the Constitution that provides states with robust states' rights. We use that often to protect ourselves and to make sure that our 10th Amendment right is not being violated. Our approach to our civil rights as well. So we are aggressive in response, but I don't think taking on the approach of the Trump administration is necessarily wise. I think it's reckless, it's not thought through, it's unlawful much of the time. So that's not an approach that I would want to adopt. Ours is fact-based, strategic, thoughtful, based on the law, based on the facts, based on the Constitution, with compassion and love for our people, the American people, the California people, always first and foremost and top of mind. So I don't think we need to adopt his approach. I think our approach is working just fine.
Quick follow-up on Apple here. We heard today from a group that represents it. Have you been hearing anything from the company itself or other electronics manufacturers? And also, do you see a role for the state to get involved here? Seeing that this is a California company and that it is being kind of explicitly targeted, seems, by the president in this way?
We definitely will assess our potential role. We, of course, are proud of our California-born companies that are some of the greatest in the world. And we want to make sure that they continue to provide great products and great jobs and drive our economy forward. It's companies like Apple that have led us to being the 4th largest economy in the world. We're proud of that. We're proud of California companies, and we want to make sure that their rights are not violated, especially by the President of the United States, which is not something that you would normally have to protect against, you would think, but apparently we may now. So we'll, this is late breaking, as you know. This is today breaking. So we'll assess. These are words coming from Trump. We look at the action. If there is an action, at some point there's going to be an executive order or an actual tariff that is imposed, and we'll assess the authority upon which that tariff purports to rely, the scope of that tariff, how it applies, who it applies to. Is it targeted against one company, or is it more widespread than that? We have to look at the facts and then apply the law to it before we can make a final decision. But we're interested in what he said today, and we will be monitoring what he does, if he does anything, and we'll make sure that if the law is broken and we have standing to sue, we'll take appropriate action.
Thank you so much, everybody. That's all the time we have for today.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.